I remember that day down to the smallest details. The sun, mercilessly bright, reflected in the smooth sea surface, while waves, as if whispering promises of future happiness, rushed onto the shore. Our new house, snow-white, with blue shutters and a spacious veranda, seemed like the embodiment of all my dreams. For 3 years, I had saved every penny, denied myself everything, worked without days off in my small flower shop. And finally, the dream came true. I stood on the threshold, clutching the keys in my hands, when the phone rang.
Andrei.
He had promised to come by evening to help with the first boxes. I answered, not hiding the joy in my voice. Nastya, we need to talk. His tone was unusually serious, which immediately alarmed me. There's something important. I sat down on the porch steps, still admiring the sea. How could I have imagined that in a minute my perfect world would collapse? Lena and Kirill are moving in with us. They have nowhere else to go.
Lena is his ex-wife.
Kirill is their son, a 10-year-old boy whom I've only seen a couple of times. I remained silent, trying to comprehend what I had just heard.
Are you listening?
Nastya, I know this isn't easy, but... He paused, then added in a tone that brooked no argument, my ex-wife and child will be living with us.
Accept it.
I felt the ground disappearing beneath my feet. This wasn't how I had imagined our life by the sea. Not with the ghosts of his past under the same roof. My throat went dry, and blood pounded in my temples. Andrei, but we agreed. This house is our new beginning, just you and me.
Circumstances have changed, he cut me off.
Lena has serious problems, she needs help. And Kirill is my son, I can't turn my back on them. I watched the incoming waves, and they no longer seemed so welcoming. Something dark and troubling was rising from their depths, just as it was in my soul. When will they arrive? Was all I could ask. They're already on their way. They'll be here by dinner.
I closed my eyes. By dinner.
They would be here in a few hours in my house, for which I had paid all my savings. In the house of my dreams, which was suddenly turning into some strange family experiment. After hanging up the phone, I sat on the porch for a long time, trying to collect my thoughts. What did I know about Lena? Only that she had left Andrei 5 years ago, running off with some businessman to Europe. She had left her son with her ex-husband, only occasionally appearing in his life. And now she was returning.
To my house. To my husband.
I slowly rose and entered the house. The empty rooms, smelling of fresh paint, now seemed foreign. I ran my hand along the snow-white wall of the living room. This is where our sofa was supposed to be, and on the wall, photographs from our mountain trip. Now I had to decide where to accommodate Lena and Kirill. I went up to the second floor. The room we had planned to make a guest room would now become their bedroom. Or perhaps Kirill needs a separate room. That means I'd have to give up my future office too. The place where I had dreamed of drawing sketches for my flower shop. Suddenly, anger overwhelmed me. Why hadn't Andrei discussed this with me? Why had he presented it as a fait accompli? And why now, when we were finally supposed to start living together in our own home? I took out my phone, intending to call him back, to tell him everything that had been building up inside me. But then I lowered my hand. What would that change? Lena and Kirill were already on their way here. Andrei had made his decision.
And I
had to either accept his choice or... The thought of breaking up burned me from within. 3 years of relationship, plans, dreams, all crossed out because he decided to help his former family? But wasn't this what I had always valued in Andrei, his responsibility, his readiness to support those close to him? I went out onto the veranda and took a deep breath. The sea air calmed me a little. I needed to act, not drown in resentment. I went down to the car and began unloading the first boxes of belongings. Work helped me not to think. An hour later, I heard the sound of an approaching car. My heart sank. Could they be here already? But it was Andrei alone. He got out of the car with a guilty look, holding an enormous bouquet of my favorite peonies. I'm sorry about how things turned out, he said, extending the flowers. I know this isn't what we dreamed of. I accepted the bouquet but couldn't bring myself to smile. Why didn't you discuss this with me? Why did you present me with a fait accompli? Andrei sighed heavily and sat down on the porch steps. Lena called last night. She's having serious problems with the man she left with. He hesitated, choosing his words. He raised his hand against her. And against Kirill too. They ran away from him. They truly have nowhere to go. I sat down next to him, digesting what I'd heard. The situation turned out to be more complicated than I thought. How serious is it? Are they in danger?
I don't know.
Lena says he might be looking for them. That's why I agreed immediately, without discussion. Nastya, this is temporary, just until they get back on their feet. I looked at the sea, trying to collect my thoughts.
Temporary.
How often does this temporary stretch into months, or even years? And what about Kirill?
How is he?
Scared. Withdrawn into himself. Lena says he's barely spoken in the last few weeks. I imagined a frightened boy, traveling now in our direction, to a strange house, to an almost unfamiliar woman. I felt ashamed of my thoughts.
All right, I said finally.
We'll manage. But we need rules, Andrei. Clear boundaries. This is still our home. He nodded and embraced me tightly.
Thank you.
I knew you would understand. We started unloading the things together. I tried to focus on the work, but my thoughts kept returning to the upcoming meeting. How would I look into the eyes of the woman who was once my husband's wife? What would I say to the boy who possibly sees me as the destroyer of his family? The sun was already setting when we heard the sound of another car.
A taxi.
I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans and went out onto the porch. Andrei stood beside me, gently squeezing my hand. A slender woman with short blonde hair stepped out of the taxi. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. Behind her, holding her hand, emerged a thin boy with a wary gaze. Kirill was the spitting image of Andrei, the same dark eyes, the same shape of lips. Hello, I said, trying to make my voice sound friendly.
Welcome.
Lena nodded, clearly as embarrassed by the situation as I was.
Thank you for letting us come, she said quietly.
I know how this looks and... Let's bring in your things first, I interrupted.
Then we'll talk.
You must be tired from the journey. Andrei gave me a grateful look and went to help with the luggage. I turned to Kirill, and you must be hungry? I have cookies with chocolate chips. The boy looked at his mother, as if asking for permission, and after her nod, quietly said, thank you. We entered the house, 5 people in a space designed for 2. I could feel the tension hanging in the air. But looking at Kirill's frightened face, at the bruise barely visible under Lena's t-shirt sleeve, I understood that I had done the right thing. This wouldn't be easy. But perhaps in this house by the sea, there would be enough room for all our stories, fears, and hopes. I set the table, trying to create at least some semblance of comfort among the boxes. Kirill sat hunched over his plate, occasionally casting wary glances at me. Lena barely ate, just twirling a cup of tea in her hands. Andrei tried to lighten the mood by talking about the house, about the wonderful beach just 5 minutes away. Tomorrow we can go for a swim, he suggested, addressing Kirill. Remember how we went snorkeling last year? The boy nodded weakly, not lifting his eyes from the plate. I noticed how his lips trembled, as if he wanted to smile but changed his mind. After dinner, when Kirill dozed off on the couch, exhausted from the journey, Andrei, Lena, and I sat on the veranda.
The sea was dark now, with only the moonlight path shimmering on the wharves.
I understand how awkward this is, Lena began, nervously interlacing and releasing her fingers. If there had been another way.
Tell me what happened, I asked quietly.
If we're going to live under the same roof, I need to know what we're dealing with. She took a deep breath and began to speak. The story turned out to be both ordinary and terrifying at the same time. A wealthy lover, who at first showered her with gifts, gradually transformed into a tyrant. He controlled her every move, isolated her from friends. And then he began to raise his hand, first against her, and later against Kirill too. When he hit our son, I knew we had to run. Lena's voice trembled. We left when he wasn't home. But he has connections, money. He's already called, threatened me.
Did you go to the police? Asked Andrei.
Lena gave a bitter smile. He has his people there.
They took my statement and... nothing.
I looked at the waves and thought about how fragile human life can be. Just this morning I had been dreaming of a cloudless future, and now in my home was a woman fleeing from violence, and a child with extinguished eyes. You need to see a doctor, I said, remembering the bruise on Lena's arm. Especially Kirill.
And document everything.
Why? She asked wearily. Because if he finds you, you'll need evidence. Andrei looked at me gratefully.
Lena nodded.
I'll look for a job as soon as things settle down a bit, she said. I don't intend to be a burden. What skills do you have?
I asked.
Before leaving, I worked in a travel agency. I know English, German. There are many hotels in our city, I remarked. The season is in full swing, Surely they need people at reception. That night, Andre and I lay awake for a long time. He embraced me, whispering words of gratitude, while I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand if I was doing the right thing. But something told me, sometimes life itself decides how your story should unfold. Morning brought new concerns. We needed to arrange the house, decide where to place things, considering not 2 but 4 residents now. I gave Lena and Kirill the brightest room on the second floor, with a view of the sea. My future office turned into a room for the boy. We can put a desk by the window here, I showed Kirill. You'll do your homework and watch the waves. He nodded silently, but I noticed how his eyes lit up when I mentioned that an old mulberry tree grew in the garden behind the house. Can I climb it? He asked for the first time all morning.
Of course, I smiled.
I'll even help you build a tree house there, if you want. Lena, who was arranging clothes in the wardrobe, gave me a surprised look. Are you really going to bother with him?
Why not? I shrugged.
I've always wanted a treehouse, but in my childhood, I only had an old apple tree, too flimsy for such ventures. Kirill smiled weakly for the first time, and I felt something warm spreading in my chest. Perhaps everything wasn't so bad after all? After lunch, we headed to the beach. The day was hot, and the sand burned our feet. I watched as Andre taught Kirill how to dive with a mask. The boy was gradually warming up, even laughing when his father tossed him in the water. Lena sat next to me under the umbrella, thoughtfully gazing at the sea. You know, I've always envied you, she suddenly said.
Me? I was surprised. Yes.
When I found out that Andre had you.
So. Whole. Knowing what you want. With your own business dreams.
I didn't know what to answer. I never thought that the woman who once caused Andre so much pain could envy me. Why did you leave him? I asked directly. Lena remained silent for a long time, watching her son and former husband.
Because I was a fool, she finally answered.
I thought I deserved more than a life with a modest engineer. I wanted luxury, travel. But what I got was a golden cage. There was such bitterness in her voice that I involuntarily placed my hand on her shoulder.
She flinched at the touch.
Don't think, Lena quickly added, that I have any claims on Andre. What was between us died long ago. I just want my son to be safe.
I know, I replied.
And I'll do everything I can to help you both. In the evening, when Kirill was already asleep and Lena was taking a shower, Andre and I sat on the veranda. I told him about our conversation at the beach. Do you believe her? He asked, looking into my eyes.
I pondered.
Did I believe the woman who once broke the heart of the man I loved? Who abandoned her child for a wealthy lover? I don't know, I answered honestly. But I believe that no one deserves violence. And Kirill definitely shouldn't have to go through this. Andre kissed me, and I tasted salt on his lips. I love you, he whispered. And I promise, this is temporary. We'll get through this. I nodded, though I still had doubts inside. Life rarely returns to its former course when such changes burst into it. The next morning, the phone rang. Andre answered and immediately tensed up. I saw how the knuckles of his fingers gripping the phone turned white.
Who is it?
I asked when he finished the conversation. Him, Andre replied curtly.
Igor. Lena's lover.
Somehow he got my number. Asked if she was with me. And what did you say? I told him I haven't seen her for several years. But I'm not sure he believed me. We exchanged glances. The situation was becoming more dangerous than I had anticipated.
We need to tell Lena, I said.
And possibly seek help.
From whom?
Andre scoffed bitterly. You heard what she said about the police. There are organizations that help victims of domestic violence. I'll look for information. On the same day, I found the phone number of a crisis center in the nearest major city. Lena refused to call for a long time, fearing that it would only make the situation worse, but eventually agreed to at least get a consultation. In the evening, after putting Kirill to bed, the three of us sat on the veranda again. The night was quiet, with only cicadas chirping in the grass. They offered shelter, Lena said after talking to the center. A place where Kirill and I won't be found. And legal assistance.
That's good, I nodded.
When do you want to leave? She looked at me with surprise. You want me to leave? Her voice mixed with both relief and hurt. I shook my head. No, I'm asking when you yourself want to go. This should be your decision, Lena. Andre watched us silently, clearly hesitant to intervene. Waves rustled softly in the darkness, as if whispering answers that we didn't have.
I don't know, she finally said.
Kirill has just started to adjust. Here is the sea which he loves so much.
And you.
You both are helping us, although I don't deserve it. It's not about who deserves what. I approached the veranda railing, peering into the darkness. It's about safety. If Igor found out Andrei's number, he might figure out our address too. The thought made me shudder. Our house by the sea, my dream, could turn into a trap. I called my brother, Lena continued after a pause.
He lives in Canada.
He promised to help with documents for Kirill and me if things get really bad.
Canada.
Andrei repeated. That's so far away. I saw pain in his eyes. Despite everything that had happened between them, Kirill remained his son. The thought that the boy might end up on another continent clearly caused him suffering. That's the last resort, Lena quickly added. First, I'll try to resolve everything here. The center said they would help me get a restraining order. We talked until late at night, discussing possible options. At some point, I caught myself thinking that what I felt toward Lena wasn't jealousy or dislike, but compassion. She had made mistakes for which she was now paying. And it wasn't just her who suffered from this, but an innocent child as well. The following days passed in anxious anticipation. Andrei walked around gloomier than a thundercloud, constantly checking his phone. Lena contacted a lawyer from the crisis center and was gathering documents for a restraining order. I tried to distract Kirill. We began building the promised treehouse, went to the beach, and I taught him the basics of floristry. Do you really make bouquets from real flowers? He asked one day as we were returning from the sea. Yes, I have my own shop in the city, I smiled. Would you like to go there tomorrow? I'll show you how compositions are created. His eyes lit up. Can I try it too?
Of course.
I actually have an order for wedding decorations. You'll be my assistant. In the evening, I told Andrei about my plans to take Kirill to the store. Thank you, he said quietly.
For taking care of him. He
has never been this animated with strangers.
I'm not a stranger anymore, I noted.
We live under the same roof, and I want him to be happy. He's a wonderful boy, Andrei. He hugged me, and I felt the tension of the past few days slightly releasing its grip on both of us. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of an approaching car. It was still very early, the sun just barely rising above the sea. I looked out the window and saw a black SUV with tinted windows stopped in front of our house.
My heart skipped a beat. Could it really be him? Igor?
I woke up Andrei and, throwing on a robe, went downstairs. Lena was already standing by the window, pale as a sheet.
That's his car, she whispered. He found us.
A tall man in an expensive suit stepped out of the car, despite the early hour. He unhurriedly lit a cigarette, surveying our house. Call the police, said Andrei, appearing beside us. Immediately. Lena shook her head. It's useless. They won't make it in time, and he. Call, Andrew repeated more firmly.
And I'll go talk to him. No.
Lena and I exclaimed simultaneously. But Andrew was already heading toward the door. I grabbed the phone and dialed 102, quickly explaining the situation to the dispatcher.
Lena rascht upstairs to Kirill.
I looked out the window and saw Andrew approach the stranger. They were talking about something, and although I couldn't hear the words, the tension between them was obvious. Suddenly, the man stepped forward, and I saw his hand slide under his jacket.
Without hesitation, he ran out of the house.
The police are already on their way. I shouted, running up to the men. We have surveillance cameras, everything is being recorded. This was a lie, we didn't have any cameras. But Igor stopped, looking at the house suspiciously. I just want to talk to my woman, he said with a smile that sent chills down my spine. This is a family matter. Lena is no longer your woman, Andrei replied, positioning himself between me and Igor. And she'll soon have a restraining order against you.
Igor Laukhet, arrest-reining order?
Seriously? He shook his head. You don't understand who you're dealing with.
I just want to take back what belongs to me.
People can't belong to anyone, I said, surprised by my own courage. Neither Lena nor especially Kirill belong to you. His face contorted with anger. And who are you to tell me what to do? At that moment, a window opened on the second floor, and I saw Kirill. He was looking down with eyes wide open from fear. Igor noticed him too and suddenly smiled, waving his hand. Hello, little one.
Did you miss me?
Kirill recoiled from the window, and I heard Lena pulling him deeper into the room. Leave, Andrei said firmly. Or wait for the police and explain to them why you're stalking a woman and a child. Somewhere in the distance, the wail of a siren could be heard. Igor threw his half-smoked cigarette to the ground and slowly headed toward his car. This isn't over yet, he tossed over his shoulder. Tell Lena I won't back down so easily. We stood motionless until the black SUV disappeared around the corner. Only then did I feel how my knees were trembling. Are you okay? Asked Andrei, embracing me. Yes, I nodded, although it was far from the truth. We need to go back to the house. Lena and Kirill are frightened. When the police arrived, we told them what had happened. The officers recorded our statements, but didn't show much enthusiasm. Without physical violence, there's little we can do, said one of them, shrugging his shoulders. After they left, we gathered in the living room. Kirill sat close to his mother, silent. Lena looked determined, despite her paleness. We'll leave today, she said.
To a crisis center.
It's safe there, they keep the address secret. Andrei nodded, though I could see how difficult this decision was for him. I'll go with you, he said. To make sure you arrive safely.
And I'll stay here, I added. In case he comes back.
I'll tell him you've left forever. Lena looked at me gratefully. I'm sorry for dragging you into all this. Your beautiful seaside home.
A home is just walls, I replied.
What matters most is that you and Kirill are safe. Packing didn't take much time. They had been living out of suitcases anyway. Before leaving, Kirill approached me with a serious expression. Will we still finish building the tree house? He asked, and there was such hope in his voice that my heart tightened. Absolutely, I promised, hugging him. When everything settles down, you'll come back, and we'll finish the construction. I've even figured out how to make a food elevator there. His eyes lit up for a moment, but quickly dimmed again. He was too grown up for his 10 years, understanding the gravity of the situation all too well. But what if we move to Canada? He asked quietly. I knelt down so that our eyes were at the same level. Then I'll send you detailed instructions on how to build the same house there. And you'll send me photos, and I'll give you advice.
Deal.
He nodded and unexpectedly hugged me tightly. I felt his thin shoulders trembling, and I wanted to protect him from all the troubles in the world. When their car disappeared around the bend, I was left alone in the house that until recently had seemed like the embodiment of all my dreams. Now it looked empty and too big for one person. I walked through the rooms, listening to the silence, interrupted only by the sound of the sea. In Kirill's room, there was a piece of paper with an unskilled drawing on the table.
A tree house, as he imagined it.
With windows, a veranda, and even a small flag on the roof. I carefully took the drawing and attached it to the refrigerator with a magnet. The following days dragged on slowly. Andrei called every evening, telling me how Lena and Kirill had settled in the crisis center. He said he had stayed in the city, renting a room nearby to be close to his son. I missed him, but understood his decision. Igor didn't show up again, but I still flinched at every sound of a passing car. On the third day, I couldn't bear it anymore and called my friend Masha.
Come over, I pleaded.
I'm scared to be alone. Masha arrived 2 hours later with a huge bag of groceries and a bottle of wine. Tell me everything, she demanded when we settled on the veranda. What's this detective story with the ex-wife? I told her everything, from beginning to end. Masha listened without interrupting, only shaking her head and occasionally whistling in surprise. And now what? She asked when I finished. Will you continue living between two fires? I don't know, I answered honestly. It all depends on whether Lena gets a restraining order, whether Igor can reach them. And you? Masha looked at me intently. What will happen to you, Nastya? I remained silent, looking at the sea. The sun was setting, painting the waves in a golden color. I love Andrei, I finally said. And strange as it may seem, I've grown attached to Kirill. He's an amazing boy, Masha. Talented, sensitive. He doesn't deserve what he had to go through.
And Lena? My friend squinted.
Have you grown attached to her too? I smirked, not exactly attached. But I understand her. She made a mistake and paid a cruel price for it. Masha shook her head. You're too kind, Nastya. In your place, I wouldn't have let the ex-wife cross my threshold. And leave the child in danger?
She sighed. No, of course not.
But still, the situation is bizarre.
We talked until late at night.
Masha stayed over, and for the first time in several days, I slept peacefully, knowing there was someone else in the house. In the morning, during breakfast, my phone rang.
Andrei.
Nastya, His voice sounded anxious. Igor found a crisis center. The cup slipped from my hands and shattered on the tile floor.
What? How? I don't know.
Last night he was seen near the building. Security didn't let him inside, but he was shouting, threatening. Lena is hysterical. Kirill has withdrawn into himself again. What are you going to do? The center's lawyer is expediting the restraining order process. But meanwhile, he paused, and I felt I was about to hear something important. Lena decided to accept her brother's offer. They're flying to Canada.
I closed my eyes.
Deep down I knew this was where everything was heading. But hearing it out loud was still painful.
When? In 3 days.
My brother has already bought the tickets and is processing the documents.
And you? My voice trembled.
Will you fly with them?
No, he answered firmly.
My life is here with you.
But I will visit Kirill, of course.
And we'll stay in constant contact. I exhaled with relief, though immediately felt ashamed of my selfishness. Of course, Andrei should be near his son. But the thought that he might leave for another country was unbearable. When will you come back home?
I asked. Tonight.
I want to spend as much time as possible with Kirill before leaving, but... I miss you, Nastya. I miss you too, I answered quietly.
Come back soon.
After our conversation, I sat for a long time, staring at one spot. Masha silently poured me some tea and placed her hand on my shoulder.
Everything will work out, she said.
You'll get through this. I nodded, though I wasn't sure about it. Too much had happened over the past week, our lives had changed too dramatically. In the evening, after seeing Masha off, I started preparing dinner. I wanted to welcome Andrei with something special, to create at least an illusion of normalcy. I turned on music, opened a bottle of wine, even lit candles. When the key turned in the lock, I rushed to the hallway. Andrei looked exhausted, but his face brightened when he saw me. He embraced me tightly, and for several minutes we just stood there, not saying a word. During dinner, he shared the details. Lena and Kirill were flying to Toronto, where her brother lived with his family. He would help them settle in, find work, and a school for the boy. Kirill asked me to give you this. Andrei took a folded piece of paper from his pocket. I unfolded it. It was another drawing of a treehouse, but this time it depicted 4 figures, a tall man, 2 women, and a boy. At the bottom, in uneven childish handwriting, was written, "Thank you for everything. I will definitely build one just like this in Canada." A lump rose in my throat, and I couldn't hold back my tears. He became very attached to you, Andrei said quietly. He kept asking when we would return home to Nastya. I became attached to him too, I admitted, wiping away my tears. And even to Lena, strangely enough. Andrei took my hand. I'm sorry for all of this. This isn't how we imagined our life in this house. Life rarely corresponds to our ideas about it, I remarked philosophically. But you know. I don't regret it. We helped them when they needed help. That's more important than any plans. That night we couldn't fall asleep for a long time, talking about everything under the sun, about the future, about Kirill, about how often Andrei would fly to Canada, about my store, which I had neglected because of all these events. Finally, near morning, we fell asleep, holding each other tightly. The next 2 days flew by as if in a fog. Andrei spent most of his time with Kirill, while I focused on the store, which needed attention after my absence. Work helped me not to think about the upcoming separation. On the day of departure, we all went to the airport together. Lena looked tense but determined. Kirill held his father's hand and tried not to cry, though I could see how much effort it cost him. "Thank you for everything," Lena said, hugging me before going through passport control. "I will never forget that you opened your home to us, even though you had every reason to turn away." I awkwardly hugged her back. It was strange to realize that the woman I had been ready to hate was now flying to another country, and I sincerely wished her safety and happiness. "Take care of yourself," was all I could say.
"And Kirill?"
She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. Then it was time to say goodbye to the boy. He rushed to me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "I'll send you pictures of the house when I build it," he promised, looking up at me. "And maybe you and Dad can come visit us?" "We'll definitely come," I promised, feeling a lump rising in my throat again. "And don't forget to keep drawing, you have a real talent." Andrei embraced his son for a long time, whispering something in his ear. I stepped aside, giving them a chance to say goodbye in private. Finally, they announced the boarding for the flight. Lena took Kirill by the hand, and they slowly walked toward the boarding gate. Just before entering, The boy turned around and waved to us. I waved back, barely holding back tears.
We drove home in silence.
Andrei gripped the steering wheel tightly, and I could see how much effort it took him to keep himself together. I placed my hand on his shoulder, and he nodded gratefully without taking his eyes off the road. "They'll only arrive tomorrow," he said at last. "They have a layover in Amsterdam. Lena promised to call as soon as they land." "Everything will be fine," I replied, though I wasn't sure of it myself. "The main thing is that they're safe." When we returned home, I felt the exhaustion wash over me. The past few days had been so intense that I was running on adrenaline alone. Now that it was all over, it felt as if my strength had abandoned me. "I think I'll lie down," I said to Andrei. "It's been a difficult day." He nodded, looking absently out the window. "I'll sit on the veranda for a while. I need to
think."
I went up to the bedroom and lay down without undressing. Sleep wouldn't come. Fragments of thoughts and memories kept spinning in my head. There was Kirill, laughing on the beach. Lena, gazing thoughtfully at the sea. Igor with his cold smile. Everything mixed together, like in a kaleidoscope. I don't know how long I lay there, but it had already grown dark outside when I heard Andrei's footsteps. He quietly entered the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "Are you awake?" he asked, though he surely could see that my eyes were open.
"I can't fall asleep," I confessed. "Too many thoughts."
He lay down beside me, embraced me, and I felt the warmth of his body. "I keep thinking about what Lena told you before she left," he said quietly. "About how you opened your home to us, even though you had every reason to turn away." I turned to face him. "What are you getting at?" "That I'm incredibly grateful to fate for meeting you," his voice trembled. "Not every woman would accept her husband's ex-wife and her child. Especially under such circumstances." "I did what I thought was right," I simply replied. "And besides, Kirill is your son. I couldn't leave him in trouble." Andrei was silent for a long time, stroking my hair. "You know what I was thinking about on the veranda," he finally said. "About how strangely everything has turned out. Just a week ago, I was certain I knew what our future would look like. But now. I raised myself on my elbow, peering at his face in the dimly lit room. "But now I understand that nothing can be predicted. Life can change at any moment. And the only thing I'm sure of is that I want to live it with you, no matter what happens." He took a small velvet box out of his pocket. "I bought this even before we moved here. I wanted to propose in our new home by the sea. Then all this happened, and somehow the right moment never came. But now I understand there's no point in waiting for the perfect moment. Life is what it is."
He opened the box.
Inside was a simple but elegant ring with a small sea-green sapphire.
"Marry me, Nastya.
Let's create a family, no matter how complicated our story is." I looked at the ring, and the tears I had been holding back all day finally streamed from my eyes. "Yes," I whispered, embracing him.
"Of course yes."
He slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been created just for me. We kissed, and I tasted the salt of tears. I don't know whether they were mine or his. "I love you," he said, pulling away. "And I promise I'll do everything so that you never regret your decision." "I love you too," I replied. "And I already don't regret anything." That night we finally fell asleep, holding each other tightly. And in the morning, we were awakened by a phone call.
Lena.
They had safely arrived in Toronto. Her brother had met them at the airport. Kirill was tired, but holding up well. "He asked to tell you that he has already picked out a tree near Uncle's house," said Lena, and I heard a smile in her voice. "He says it's perfect for a treehouse." "Tell him I'm waiting for photos," I replied.
"And
take care of yourselves."
"We will. And Nastya." She paused.
"Thank you for everything." After the conversation, Andrei and I went out to the veranda. The morning was clear. The sea sparkled in the rays of the rising sun. I looked at the waves and thought about how amazingly life unfolds. A week ago, I was dreaming of a quiet life together in a house by the sea. Now I stood on the threshold of a new life, with a husband who has a son in another country, with a ring on my finger, and with the understanding that sometimes the most unexpected turns of fate lead us exactly where we are meant to be. "What are you thinking about?" asked Andrei, embracing me by the shoulders. "About how a home is not just walls," I replied, looking at the sea. "Home is the people we love. And sometimes it can be very large, stretching across oceans and continents." He kissed me, and I felt the last worries fade away. Whatever awaited us ahead, we would manage. Together. 3 months later, we we received the first photograph from Kirill. It showed a treehouse, not as large as we had planned, but with a real veranda and even a small flag on the roof. Next to the treehouse stood Kirill himself, smiling from ear to ear. He looked happy, and that was the most important thing. I built it according to our drawings, he wrote in his letter. Uncle helped with the roof, but I did the rest myself. When you come, I'll show you all the secret compartments. I hung the photograph on the wall in our living room, next to our wedding pictures. We got married quietly, without special celebrations, but with a sense that everything was as it should be. Andrei insisted that we call Kirill right from the registry office. The boy was thrilled and demanded that we definitely visit him during the holidays.
We'll definitely come, I promised.
But for now, tell me, how is your treehouse doing? He talked non-stop, and I listened smiling. Life continued, unpredictable, complex, but amazingly beautiful in its unexpected turns. Sometimes, standing on our veranda and looking at the smooth sea, I think about how curiously life unfolds. Who would have thought that the house of my dreams would become the beginning of a story that was impossible to predict? 6 months have passed since Lena and Kirill flew to Canada. Andrei and I have gradually settled into our home, filling it with comfort and warmth. My flower shop is thriving. I even hired an assistant to handle the increased number of orders. Andrei got a promotion at work. It would seem that life has entered a peaceful course. But every Friday evening, we sit in front of the computer and video call Kirill. He shows us his drawings, tells us about his new school, about the friends he's beginning to make. And of course, about his treehouse, which he constantly improves. The last time, he proudly demonstrated to us a system of pulleys with which he lifts a basket of sandwiches up to the treehouse. Do you remember, like in our drawing? He asked me, beaming. Lena is also gradually coming to her senses. She found a job at a travel agency specializing in European trips. Her knowledge of languages proved to be just what was needed. She looks calmer, more confident than when I last saw her. Sometimes, after talking with Kirill, she lingers briefly at the screen to chat with me while Andrei and Kirill discuss some of their own men's business.
How are you? She asks.
How is your life? And I tell her about our house, about the store, about plans for the future. Strange, but these conversations with a woman whom I once considered a rival have become almost therapeutic for me. We both went through our own trials and emerged as different people. In early December, when the first frosts bound the earth, and the sea turned leaden gray and unwelcoming, I received a strange letter. No return address, with a local postmark. Inside was just a single sheet of paper with printed text, "I know where they are. And you know who I am."
My heart froze. Igor.
It could only be him.
But how?
Why now, after so many months? And why was the letter addressed to me, not Andrei? I sat for a long time with the paper in my hands, not knowing what to do.
Tell Andrei?
He had only recently stopped waking up at night from nightmares in which Igor finds Kirill.
Call Lena?
Why disturb her when she had finally started a new life? In the end, I decided to wait. Perhaps it was just a cruel joke. Or an empty threat from someone who couldn't accept losing control. But a week later, a second letter arrived. This time with a photograph. The picture was taken from a distance, but I immediately recognized Kirill leaving school. Lena was walking beside him, holding his hand. On the back of the photograph was written, "Toronto is beautiful this time of year, isn't it?" My hands began to shake. He had found them. Somehow tracked them down, discovered their address. And now he was letting me know that they were in danger. I could no longer remain silent. After waiting for Andrei to return from work, I showed him both letters. He turned pale, his hand with the photograph trembling. "We need to warn Lena immediately," he said, reaching for the phone.
Wait, I stopped him.
Let's think this through first. If we just call and tell them that Igor has found them, they'll panic. Lena might flee, take Kirill somewhere where we won't be able to find them. What do you suggest? Desperation sounded in his voice.
I took a deep breath. Go there. To them.
Warn them personally and help sort out the situation. Andrei looked at me with wide-open eyes. You will go with me to Canada? Of course, I replied, surprised at his surprise. We are family. And Kirill is part of our family. He hugged me tightly, and I felt the tension releasing him a little. Thank you, he whispered. I don't know what I did to deserve such a wife. We packed quickly. I left the store with my assistant. Andrei took unpaid leave. 2 days later, we were sitting on a plane headed to Toronto. The entire journey, I couldn't shake my anxious thoughts. What if we were too late? What if Igor had already reached them? Or perhaps this was just a ploy to lure us away from home, and the real targets weren't Lena and Kirill, but Andrei and me?
But we had no choice.
We had to make sure they were all right. Toronto greeted us with snow and a piercing wind. We hadn't warned Lena about our arrival, deciding it would be safer that way. Lena's brother, Maxim, met us at the airport. Andrei had contacted him in advance, explaining the situation. They don't suspect anything, Maxim said as we drove in his car through the snow-covered streets. Lena has finally relaxed, believing they're safe here.
We didn't want to frighten her, Andrei replied.
But these letters.
I understand, Maxim nodded.
You did the right thing by coming. Together we'll figure something out. Maxim's house turned out to be a cozy two-story cottage in a quiet suburb. By the time we arrived, it had already grown dark, and warm light poured through the windows. I imagined how surprised Kirill would be when he saw us at the doorstep. That's exactly what happened. When Maxim opened the door and we entered the hallway, Kirill peeked out from the living room. For a second he stood there, not believing his eyes, and then with a cry of "Dad!
Nastya!" He rushed toward us.
Andrei caught him in his arms, and I embraced them both, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. Lena came out next, and her face reflected a whole range of emotions: surprise, joy, and
fear.
"What happened?" she asked, and I realized she immediately guessed. We hadn't come just for a casual visit. We told her everything, showed her the letters and the photograph. She remained silent for a long time, staring at the picture where she and Kirill were leaving the school. Then she looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "He found us.
Even here."
"We don't know for sure that he's here," I tried to reassure her. "He might have just hired someone to take the photo." "What difference does it make?" she said with a bitter smile. "He knows where we are. That means we have to run again."
"No," Andrew said firmly. "This time we will fight. Together."
Kirill, whom we had sent upstairs so he wouldn't hear the adult conversation, suddenly appeared on the stairs. "I don't want to go anywhere," he said, and I was amazed at how grown-up his voice sounded. "I like it here.
I've made friends. And my tree house."
Lena approached her son and hugged him. "We're not going anywhere, little one. Dad is right, this time we will fight." We talked until late at night, discussing our plan of action. Maxim, who worked as a lawyer, suggested going to the police. In Canada, such threats are taken seriously. Andrei insisted on hiring a private detective who could find out whether Igor was really in Toronto or if this was just intimidation. Lena remained silent, only occasionally adding brief comments. Finally, when everyone had gone to their rooms, I stayed alone with her in the kitchen. She was brewing tea, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "You could have stayed home, sent Andrei alone." "And miss meeting Kirill?"
I smiled. "Never.
Besides, we're family. And family sticks together, especially in difficult times." Lena looked at me with a long gaze that conveyed a mixture of gratitude and surprise. "You know, I always thought I didn't deserve a second chance," she confessed, handing me a cup of tea. "After everything I've done. Abandoning my son, destroying my family. And then dragging you into this whole situation with Igor." "Everyone deserves a second chance," I replied. "And besides, look at Kirill.
He's happy here.
He's made friends, he's making plans. That's worth any difficulties." We sat in the kitchen until late at night. For the first time since we met, we were truly talking, not as rivals, not as reluctant housemates, but as two women bound by fate to the same story. Lena told me about her life with Igor, how gradually the fairy tale turned into a nightmare, how she lost herself day by day, how she feared for Kirill. "The scariest part wasn't the physical violence," she said quietly, staring into her cup. "It was that I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. As if my personality was dissolving, disappearing. I became a shadow, an echo of his desires and fears." I listened and thought about how easily we pass judgment on others without knowing their stories. How simple it had been for me to hate Lena for leaving Andrei and Kirill. And how difficult it turned out to be to acknowledge that behind every action lies an entire universe of reasons, fears, and hopes. In the morning, we went to the police. Maxim helped us file a report, describing the situation in detail. To my surprise, the officer took our story with complete seriousness. He carefully examined the letters and the photograph, asking numerous questions about how Igor might have discovered Lena's new address. "We'll check all flights from Russia over the past month," he said, making notes. "And we'll increase patrols around your son's school. If this person is indeed in Toronto, we'll find him." Leaving the station, I felt the tension ease slightly. For the first time in a long while, we had hoped that someone besides ourselves was interested in Lena and Kirill's safety. The following days passed in a strange state of anticipation. Andrei and I decided to stay in Toronto for some time, at least until the situation became clearer. I contacted my assistant, explained that I would be delayed, and asked her to look after the shop. Andrei worked remotely, fortunately his profession allowed for that. Kirill was on cloud nine with happiness. He took us to his favorite places in the city, proudly showed us his school, introduced us to his friends. And most importantly, he finally presented us with his famous treehouse. "Look, Nastya!" he exclaimed enthusiastically, climbing up the ladder. "I did everything just as we planned. There's a secret compartment for treasures, and a rope ladder that can be pulled up so no one can climb in, and even a small window with a spyglass." I climbed up after him, amazed at how much he had managed to accomplish in these months. The little house was a true work of art, with well-thought-out details, a cozy interior, and even a small stove that Maxim had helped install for cold days. "This is incredible," I admired sincerely. "You're a real architect, Kirill." He beamed at the praise, but then suddenly became serious. "Nastya, is it true that that bad person might come here?" I froze. We tried not to discuss the situation with Igor in front of the boy, but of course, he was smart enough to understand that something was happening. "We don't know for sure," I answered cautiously. "But even if he does come, we won't let him hurt you or your mom. I promise." Kirill nodded, accepting my answer. Then he pulled out a sketchbook from his secret compartment. "Do you want to see what I've drawn lately?" I gratefully shifted to a more pleasant topic. Kirill's drawings had noticeably improved over the past few months. They now had depth, details, and emotions. I was especially touched by one, our house by the sea, with 4 figures standing on the veranda: Andrei, me, Lena, and Kirill himself.
Is this your dream?
I asked, pointing at the drawing.
He shrugged, I don't know.
I just thought how great it would be if we all lived together.
Withhut 4.
I hugged him, at a loss for words. Children's logic sometimes amazes with its simplicity and wisdom. For Kirill, there was nothing strange about his parents and me living under one roof. The most important thing was for everyone to be happy and safe. In the evening, while putting Kirill to bed, he insisted that I be the one to read him a bedtime story. I told Andrei and Lena about this conversation. We sat in the living room, sipping the wine that Maxim had brought. "Children see the world differently," Lena said thoughtfully. "For them, everything is simple. If you love someone, you want to be near them.
No complications, no conventions."
"And we adults complicate everything," Andrei added. "We create problems where there are none." I looked at them, former spouses who once loved each other, then grew to hate each other, and now were bound by a common trouble and shared love for their son, and thought about how strangely life is arranged. Just 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined that I would be sitting in a living room in Toronto, discussing Kirill's upbringing with Lena. On the 5th day of our stay in Canada, a police officer called. They had checked all flights and found no trace of Igor. However, this didn't mean there was no threat. He could have entered using forged documents or through a third country. "We will continue surveillance," the officer assured us. "And we recommend that you remain cautious. Don't drastically change your daily routine, but be attentive to any suspicious individuals or vehicles." After this call, we gathered for a family council. We needed to decide what to do next. "Maybe it's just intimidation?" Maxim suggested. "He wants to keep you in fear, to control you even from a distance."
Possibly, Lena nodded.
"That sounds like Igor. He always enjoyed the awareness of his power." "Whatever it is, we can't live in this suspended state forever," said Andrei. "Nastya and I can't stay here indefinitely, we have work, a home." "I understand," Lena replied quietly. "You've already done more than I could have expected." I looked at her and saw fear in her eyes, fear of being left alone with the threat once again. And suddenly, it dawned on me.
"What if we don't go back?"
I said, surprised by my own words.
"What?"
Andrei turned to me in bewilderment. "What if we stay in Canada?"
"Not forever, of course. For a few months.
"Until we're sure the danger has passed." "But your shop?"
Andrei began.
"Marina is doing an excellent job," I interrupted. "I can consult her remotely. And you're already working from home. Why can't that home be in Toronto?"
Sie längste Fell.
Everyone looked at me with varying degrees of surprise. You're really willing to do this?" Lena finally asked.
For us. For Kirill, I answered. And for all of us. We're family, remember?
And family sticks together. Andre came over to me and hugged me tightly. You are an amazing woman, Nastya. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do, I smiled. Otherwise, I wouldn't have married you. So we decided to stay in Toronto for an indefinite period. Maxim helped us rent a small apartment not far from their house, close enough for Kirill to visit, but still preserving personal space for everyone. I contacted Marina, explained the situation, and officially appointed her as the store manager during my absence. Andre arranged with his management to extend his remote work arrangement. Kirill was beside himself with joy. When we told him about our decision, he couldn't believe it at first, and then rushed to hug both of us. So we can build another floor in the little house? He asked excitedly. And you'll teach me how to make real bouquets? And we'll all go to a hockey game together. His enthusiasm was contagious, and even Lena, who initially felt uncomfortable because we were staying because of her, gradually relaxed. We agreed that we would meet regularly, spend weekends together, but otherwise live our own lives. Winter in Toronto turned out to be harsher than I expected. Snow, frost, piercing wind, all of this was unusual after the mild climate by the sea. But there was a certain charm to it. Andre and I walked through snow-covered parks, went ice skating, and discovered cozy cafes and galleries. I even started looking into the local flower market. Perhaps someday I'll open a branch of my shop here too. The police continued their surveillance, but found no signs of Igor's presence. No more letters arrived. Gradually, we began to hope that the threat was merely a method of intimidation, an attempt to maintain control even from a distance. At the end of January, Lena received a promotion offer at the travel agency. Now she would be overseeing the luxury European tours division, a job she had always dreamed of. We celebrated this event at a restaurant, and for the first time in a long while, I saw her laugh genuinely, without a shadow of fear in her eyes. You know, she said to me when we were alone in the ladies' room, sometimes I wake up and can't believe all this is happening to me. New job, safety, Kirill is happy. And you and Andre are nearby. You deserve happiness, Lena, I replied sincerely. After everything you've been through. She shook her head. I'm not sure I deserve it. But I'm infinitely grateful for this chance. And especially to you, Nastya. Not every woman is capable of such generosity. I felt embarrassed by her words. I had never thought of my actions as something special. I simply did what I believed was right. You know what's most surprising? I continued, changing the subject. How Kirill has united all of us. He's like the center of our strange family structure. Lena smiled. Children are often wiser than adults. They see the essence, not the conventions. We returned to the table, where Andre and Kirill were enthusiastically discussing plans for the spring break. Looking at them, I thought about how curiously life unfolds. I would never have believed that I would be sitting at the same table with my husband's ex-wife, and it would be not tense politeness, but genuine warmth. February brought new concerns. Kirill fell ill with the flu, and we took turns looking after him. Lena was overwhelmed with work due to a new project, so the boy spent most of his time with us. I prepared chicken broth for him following my grandmother's recipe, read books to him, and together we invented stories about the adventures of a little architect building tree houses around the world. When I grow up, he told me seriously one day, when his fever had subsided and he could sit up in bed, I will build a huge house. With rooms for all of us. And with a winter garden for your flowers. That will be a beautiful house, I smiled, adjusting his blanket. But for now, rest and regain your strength. When Kirill fell asleep, I sat beside him for a long time, looking at his face, so similar to Andrei's. A strange feeling filled me, a mixture of tenderness, protectiveness, and a kind of bright melancholy. I had never thought about having children, had been too busy with my career, the shop, then my relationship with Andre. And now this boy, technically unrelated to me, had become such an important part of my life. In early March, when the snow began to melt and the air smelled of spring, what we had all subconsciously feared happened. Lena called us in the middle of the night, her voice trembling with fear. He's here, was all she said. Igor is in Toronto. It turned out she had accidentally seen him at the shopping mall where she stopped after work. He was standing by the jewelry store window, acting as if nothing was unusual, as if he had every right to be there. Fortunately, he hadn't noticed her, and Lena was able to leave undetected. We immediately contacted the police. The officer handling our case arrived within half an hour. He listened carefully to Lena, wrote down all the details, and promised to begin the search immediately. If he's really in the city, we'll find him, he assured us. In the meantime, I recommend maximum caution. Don't go out alone, especially with the child. And report any suspicious situations immediately. After he left, we sat for a long time in Maxim's kitchen, discussing the situation. Lena was pale, her hands trembling as she brought the cup of tea to her lips. Maybe it's not him? I suggested uncertainly. Just someone who looks similar? Lena shook her head. No, it's definitely Igor. I would recognize him out of thousands. What does he want? Andrei asked quietly. After so many months. Why won't he leave you alone?
Control. Lena smiled bitterly.
It's always been about control. He can't accept that I left. That I make my own decisions. For him, it's a personal defeat. But what should we do? Maxim was nervously pacing around the kitchen. Maybe we should leave for a while? To another city or even country.
And run again. Elena shook her head. No.
I'm tired of running. Kirill is finally happy here, he has friends, school.
I don't want to destroy everything again.
I looked at her and saw how the fear in her eyes was replaced by determination. This was no longer the frightened woman who had appeared on our doorstep 6 months ago. She had changed, become stronger. You're right, said Andrei, taking her hand.
Enough running. We will fight. All together.
We developed a plan. Kirill temporarily moved in with us. Either Andrei or Maxim drove him to school now. Lena took leave from work to avoid appearing in public places. We installed additional locks and video surveillance systems in both houses. The police began searching for Igor, but the city was large, and if he didn't want to be found, discovering him wouldn't be easy. Days passed, and the tension grew. Kirill sensed that something was happening, despite our attempts to hide the truth from him. Is it because of that bad man, right? He asked me one evening when I was putting him to bed. He found us again?
I didn't want to lie to him. Yes, darling.
But don't worry, we're all here together. And the police are looking for him. Kirill was silent for a moment, and then said something that made my heart clench. I'm not afraid of him, Nastya. I'm afraid that Mom will become sad and scared again.
Like before.
I hugged him, at a loss for words. This little boy wasn't worried about himself, but about his mother. About preventing her from returning to that dark place of fear from which she had escaped with such difficulty. We won't let that happen, I promised. You're